Hey, David Brewster with another episode of Chordplay, and this is the Mellow Side of Opeth. And Mikael Åkerfeldt is the guitarist and vocalist and principal songwriter and the creative, driving force behind the band Opeth. For me personally, I kind of like the idea of a hardcore Swedish death metal band that, after a few albums, they kind of matured and kind of evolved into like a progressive metal band. And then a few more albums, and as soon as Michael started working with Steven Wilson with from Porcupine Tree, Opeth definitely started to kind of change, and they worked on a project together called Storm Corrosion, which is really good. And I'm a huge Porcupine Tree, Steven Wilson fan, so as soon as that working relationship started, Opeth and Mikael Åkerfeldt were totally on my radar, because I was like, wait a minute, he's working with my guy, he's working with Porcupine Tree and, Steven Wilson. Michael was actually listed number 42 of 100 in Guitar World's, like best metal guitarist of all time poll. And he's also loosely based around the character Toki Wartooth from Metalocalypse. That's basically Mikael Åkerfeldt. And aside from working with Opeth and then also doing, Storm Corrosion with Steven Wilson, he's recorded with Ghost and Dream Theater and Steve Hackett and, Porcupine Tree and Devin Townsend and a whole bunch of musicians. So Michael's definitely very prolific. He's very talented and a very interesting musician. So if you're not really hip to him or you don't really know who I'm talking about, check him out, because he's a monster guitar player and just a badass musician too. Well, the first example here is from the song In My Time of Need, which is from the album Damnation, which came out in 2003. And Damnation is definitely one of my favorite Opeth albums. It was the first album that featured clean vocals and kind of revealed, kind of fully revealed this mellow side of Michael's playing style and music. And the song itself, it has this dreamy, it's an E minor add 9 add 11 chord, and the fingering, it's really just two fretted notes. He's grabbing the 7th fret here on the D and the 7th fret on the B, and then there's a series of open strings too. But if you cue up that song and listen to it, it sounds just like this. And there you can hear that chord, which is really cool. Just kind of picks through that, and that becomes the intro, and then it turns into the verse. Really interesting chord. I love the voicing, that fretted notes mixed with open strings again. And then it moves to an A minor 9 after a few repeats of that first chord, and then it moves into... So it's this really interesting... There we're just holding, the 5th fret there on the G string, holding that C note. And he's really just kind of picking through that chord. Really cool. The next example is from the song Window Pane, which is also on the album Damnation. And this is going to feature a capo on the 2nd fret. And I know sometimes Michael will throw a capo on, and it seems to confuse listeners, maybe if you're trying to learn some of his music by ear, and they don't realize, oh, there's a capo. So you could play this without the capo, and I'll demonstrate that. But as far as the actual guitar part, though, the capo's on the 2nd fret, and he's basically playing an E minor add 9. But with the capo, it's going to sound like an F sharp minor add 9. So you got to think of, what's actually being, produced or played right there. And the song's in 6/8, so it has this kind of almost Latin kind of, interesting groove. So it's really interesting, and you can hear... And there he's really just playing with that E minor add 9. And then that's really just kind of sliding into like a little bit of E minor 7, kind of flirting with that. But with the capo, that's technically all F sharp minor. Now, if we take the capo off, we could still finger those same chords. And you could even refinger that little sliding riff down here. So you could play that without the capo. but it definitely sounds more like the album if you use a capo. The next example is from the song Hope Leaves, which is also from the album Damnation, and I am going to show some other songs from other albums too. But I am kind of locking in to that mellower album because we're looking for the mellow side of Opeth. But Hope Leaves, it has this really interesting A minor 9, and we still have the capo on the 2nd fret, so that's a little bit of a theme, or a common theme, between these two songs that we've looked at so far, that had the capo, that is. And there you can hear this kind of melodic pattern where the arpeggio, that you're basically changing bass notes there. If you think, in relation to the capo, you're kind of grabbing that G and then the open E, and then you're reaching down and grabbing an F, and you're still holding, basically the 5th fret and on the D and the G string there, or the 7th fret if you want to ignore that capo. So right there, kind of moving between those two chords. I mean, that would basically be an F major 7 sus2 sharp 11, which is crazy. But when you arpeggiate it the way it's played in the song, it does have this very eerie, kind of dreamlike sound. Which I really love that sound. The next example is from the song Benighted, which is on the album Still Life, and as you can see, I've changed to an acoustic guitar. So Mikael does do a lot of clean, kind of dreamy, and these euphoric sounding, clean electric guitar chords, but he also seems to have a big, appreciation or interest in acoustic music, because he has sprinkled acoustic guitar parts and these really interesting textures and sounds in Opeth's music since the very beginning. And I've always liked that about him, where it's like, he can shred and play some of the, heaviest things you've ever heard, but then he can also play some of the sweetest and most calm and peaceful sounding things too, which I really like that about him. So right there you can see we're kind of doing this little descending melodic thing, kind of based around E minor 7, and then it moves into that A7 sus kind of sound with that slide up to that E, and then there's really just a stock B7 chord, and then he does this really slick E minor thing with slides and open strings. That's and then it starts over. The next example comes from the song Coil, which is on the album Watershed. And I know the first time I ever heard the song, I was hooked. I was like, oh my gosh, such a good song. I love the guitar part, the vocal parts are really great. Really good song, and most people have never even heard it before. But it starts off with this A minor 6/9, which is a very unique and strange chord. But we're going to hold the 4th fret on the D and the 5th fret on the G. So after that 2-chord opening arpeggio, then he starts doing this really cool triad thing where he's got an A major triad with the open A and the open high E. He strums strums that twice, and then move the triad down to a G, and then that's going to magically become a G6 over A. And then he's going to strum that again and move it down to an F major 7 over A. And then he basically lifts, you know, 3rd fret on the D and the 2nd fret on the G up, and then he strums that open and then hammers on to an A minor chord. So that little exchange there. The last example here is from Patterns in the Ivy, which is from Blackwater Park, and that's also, you know, a very famous and kind of well-received Opeth album. With Patterns in the Ivy, he's basically starting with an arpeggiated A sus2 chord, and I'm going to play that with my 3rd finger and my pinky, mainly because we're going to pick through it, and then he slides the fretted part of the chord up to the 5th fret, and that's going to transform that A sus2 to a C major 7 over A. Which I love when people do this kind of thing where they'll start in, you know, one voicing or one place, and then they'll kind of shift slide and then, you know, kind of mutate the chord while it's ringing. And it's kind of rare to hear this on guitar because it's hard to do. But it sounds so cool because you hear one thing and then you hear it morph into something else. And then he's going to basically hit, you know, that D string, which the 2nd fret's holding down. And then when he hits that string, that's when he slides, you know, the 3rd finger and the pinky up to the 5th fret. Like that. Now the tricky thing there is you don't want to pick again. You want to pick, you know, that final note on the A sus2, and without picking again, that's when you slide. But after he does the slid, you know, A sus2 to that C major 7 over A section, then he moves down to an F sharp 11. So just think of like an F major bar chord, but you're leaving the B string open. That's the sharp 11 right there, that B. And then he moves to an F sharp 11, and that's the same thing, just move that up 1 fret. And then a G minor add 9. And then he opens the A string. And then it goes to an A minor over G sharp, which is really strange. Which you don't really hear very many people playing with that chord. That's going to kind of give you that minor major 7 kind of flavor because you've got a major 7th mixed in with a minor triad. So it's kind of hinting at harmonic minor. Even though that seems to be based around basic chords, that's a very difficult guitar part, and that's one thing that you'll learn from working on some of Opeth's music, is you'll hear familiar sounds, you know, whether it's chords, a guitar solo, it could be, you know, really anything, arpeggios or something, but he has a very interesting twist to everything that he does, so I'm definitely a big fan of Mikael's guitar style and his music. And I'm definitely a huge Opeth fan. That's going to wrap up this look at Opeth's guitar music and the mellow side of Mikael Åkerfeldt's, you know, musical influences and style. And he seems to be a very, you know, deep individual too. I'd really like to learn a little bit more about him and just, you know, what he does aside from music, because the music that he creates is so interesting. And that makes me think, you know, whatever else he's interested in or his other, you know, hobbies or interests are probably very interesting too. So, you know, definitely check out some of their music, you know, listen to some of the songs that I kind of, you know, tapped into here with some of these chords. And aside from the acoustic and clean side of things, if you haven't heard Mikael like really play the guitar, he's an outstanding guitarist. I mean, he sounds like John Petrucci at times, you know, when he's really tearing it up. And, you know, very, very interesting guitarist for sure. All right, we'll leave some comments and some feedback if you had any breakthroughs or anything interesting happen while you work through this lesson. Please subscribe to Late Night Lessons, and I'll be back with more content, some more lessons before you know it. Thank you.